I wasn't born heartless. Before I became in that narrow alley, I was Lamb Ann, a girl who loved reading comic books and was afraid of the dark. My father used to be a long-haul truck driver. He was a quiet man, never good with words, but he always remembered to bring me a small box of sweets after every trip. My mother ran a tiny convenience shop near our home. We weren't rich, but we lived simply, and for a long time that was enough. Until the accident. One rainy night, my father's truck overturned on a mountain pass. He survived, but his spine was severely damaged. After that came endless hospital visits, expensive medication, and bills that grew heavier by the day. My mother left when the debt became too much to bear. I continued going to school, but I also worked every job I could find. Waiting tables, handing out flyers, cleaning houses, anything that paid. Still, no matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. The night I decided to step into that world, I stood outside the door for a very long time. It was raining. I remember telling myself it would only be once, just enough money for the surgery. But life is not a movie. One time became another, and then another, until it was no longer a choice, but simply the way I survived. I never told you any of this, not because I wanted to keep it secret, but because I knew that in your eyes, no reason would ever be enough to justify what I had become. There was a night when you came, and said nothing at all. You just sat there, watching me put on my makeup. You don't have to do that, you said quietly. I'm working, I replied. You stayed silent for a long moment, as if weighing something in your mind. Then you asked, almost casually, have you ever thought about leaving? I let out a faint, bitter laugh. Do you think I have that many choices? For the first time, you didn't argue. After that, something about you began to change. You were still distant, still sharp with your words. But sometimes you would walk me all the way home, without saying a single thing. One evening, I had a fever, yet I showed up anyway because I needed the money. You stared at me for a long time, before tossing a small bag of medicine onto the table. Don't misunderstand, you said. I just don't want you dying while you still owe me an appointment. I knew it was a lie, but I didn't question it. Somewhere along the way, I grew used to your presence, used to waiting for someone who always pretended to despise me. And maybe that was when my heart began to shift, slowly, quietly, out of its original place. That night, the hospital called. My father was critical. I asked the manager for permission to leave, but she refused. The booking had already been confirmed. The client was willing to pay a high price. It was you. I arrived with red eyes, and a mind exhausted to think. You looked at me and frowned. What are you trying to play tonight? The victim. I didn't answer. I only wanted everything to end quickly, so I could rush to the hospital. But you kept questioning me, kept pushing, as if you needed a reaction. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I'm tired, I whispered. You let out a cold laugh. Tired of pretending to be decent. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'm not pretending. Oh, you stood up, your voice hard. Then how are you any different from the others? You sell your body. You do it for money. I looked at you then. For the first time, I wanted to explain everything. About my father, about the hospital, about the fear that never left me. But before I could speak, my phone rang. It was the hospital again. I answered, listened for only a few seconds, and then my mind went completely blank. My father had passed away. I stood there without crying, without speaking. It felt as if all the sound in the room had disappeared, as if I were watching my own life from far away. He were still saying something, but I couldn't hear it clearly. The only words that reached me were the last ones. You think you're that pitiful? I placed my bag gently on the table, looked at you one final time. You're right, I said softly. I'm no different. Then I walked out. That night, I never returned to the alley again. I packed my belongings in silence. No one asked where I was going. No one tried to stop me. I boarded a midnight bus to a city where no one knew my name, and no one knew my past. I told myself that if I started over, I would forget you. But as the bus pulled away from the station, I realized something I hadn't expected. The only thing I couldn't leave behind was the memory of the man who once looked at me with eyes filled with contempt, and something that hurt far more, because it felt like pain he was trying, desperately, to hide.
Where are you?